Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sumi and I am the owner and illustrator of themochicloud. It is a small stationery business where I sell my original art in the form of stickers, stationery, and other accessories. I typically tend to do plan with me videos on YouTube because I'm a big fan of the Hobonichi cousin, as you may know if you've already been subscribed and watched my other videos. But I decided to do something a little different today, and part of that is because I'm currently on vacation for a couple of days, and I just could not film any of the weekly plan with me's as usual because I was quite busy this week. But I did have this footage from last week where I was illustrating, a still life image of some tomatoes and other vegetables that you would see in the reference image here. And I figured I would do a voiceover, and I just want to say that this is in no way a tutorial of sorts. It's just a way for me to show how I generally go about illustrating something. So as you can see, I've already completed one tomato, and when I start off any drawing, I usually start off with a very rough sketch. And as you can see, it's on the most lowest layer, and I generally tend to use a red pencil and keep the opacity to probably 50% so that I can just get an outline of what I'm trying to do. And when I do start the illustration, every illustration is different for me. This one is very realistic, and that's the other thing. If you look at my stationery store, most of the products that I sell they usually fall under the kawaii, cute illustration types. And I also have this very different style that I tend to use for still life images, which is super realistic or super sketchy. And this is just, I usually tend to do this when I am in a art block, when I'm going through an art block, when I just don't know what I need to draw. And this is a way for me to refresh my skills in a way. And I don't switch out many brush types throughout the drawing. I think the most that I use is 2 brushes. And the brush that I'm using for this particular drawing is the Tinderbox. It is a already available brush from the Procreate set, and I think you will find it under the inking section. And I like this brush a lot when I draw still life images, because there's this thing about it that when you lift your pen or pencil, when you lift your pencil to draw, it does not give you a uniform blend. It will layer on top of the other color that just went through. So it's a good way to layer on different colors. And I usually start with a darker outline and then go on to add more colors, lightening the entire illustration. That's what I generally do. And one of the other tools that I typically tend to use a lot when I'm doing very realistic sketches is the smudge tool. And it just allows you to smudge a lot of the colors together. And if you can see right now, I'm actually using a combination of both the Alpha Lock and the smudge tool, and going back in and disabling Alpha Lock again so that I can, get a more uniform smudging throughout the tomato. One of the things that I do want to say is, and this is, I'm in no way an expert. This is just my way of doing things. And I have, after drawing a lot of these kind of images, I kind of know to trust the process as I go through it, because it does look a little weird in the beginning, but it does tend to take shape after a few minutes. And it's kind of like makeup. The whole thing is that you need to add layers and just keep on blending. And one of the things that I'm showing you right now here is I try to keep the pressure quite low when I am using the Apple Pencil. And I've noticed that when I started off drawing, I would put a lot of pressure on my pencil, and it would wear the tips of the pencil really fast. And I would go through those pencil tips like one tip a month. And as you know, I've experienced and learned more by drawing more illustrations. You really don't need to put a lot of pressure when you are drawing on the Procreate app. And that is something that you would just come to know through experience. So I have not bought another pack since quite a bit. So this pencil tip has been going on for quite a bit, and it has been working fine. And as you can see, I had already drawn one tomato before and grouped them all together, and I just turned that image back on just so that I can get an idea of the colors that I use. They all fall under the red rust spectrum, but I just wanted to make sure that I was referencing and picking colors from the same palette that I was using for drawing the first tomato. And this is where I start to add some more depth to my drawing, and basically that's just identifying where the light source is coming from based on the reference picture that I have. And as you can see, the light is shining on the top right, and everything on the bottom left should be in a more darker area. So I just go in and start adding those colors, and I think I do zoom in a bit here, yes, to add more details. And one of the things that I have noticed, and this is again with the experience of drawing in Procreate, I used to zoom a lot and get into the nitty-gritty of the actual illustration. But one of the things that I've noticed after several attempts is that when you zoom in way too much, you just tend to get lost in that, and you do need to see your overall image from a higher up view. And so I try not to get lost into that zoomed image a lot nowadays, because it's not about the pixels anymore. It's just making sure that nothing has to be perfect. This illustration is just so that I can warm up my skills, and in the process maybe have a little fun and explore something new. And that's the other thing that I've noticed, that I typically tend to bring out my most favorite images when I take the pressure off of myself, and I stop asking myself, oh, am I creating this drawing so that I can convert it into maybe an art print, or am I doing this for social media? I just don't do that anymore. And most of the time, it's more of like a semi self-care routine. I wouldn't say that it is completely self-care, because I don't do very well when I'm in a bad mood, and my art reflects that as well. So if I try to draw something when I'm in a bad mood, it just doesn't turn out right. Anyways, here I'm adding a little bit more of that a lighter highlight to the top of the tomato, and I think it's here that I decide to move on and start sketching the actual stem of the tomato. And this is probably one of my favorite parts, because I do like adding greens quite a lot to my drawings. And like always, I think I start off with the darker green here and just drawing out a very rough sketch. And you will see that I'm not really referencing the original sketch layer that we looked at in the beginning of this video. I am just completely winging it by now and kind of going along with the actual drawing and seeing how the little leaves move around. And it is now that I start to fill in that darker green color. Again, not too much pressure. You probably will see that when I lift this pencil up and try to add it again. There is again a darker shade that comes along, so it's not a uniform blending that happens with this particular brush, which was Tinderbox. And I just continue adding that green, the darker green layout here, so that I can move on and probably add the lighter ones after I have created that darker green base. And I go again by the same concept of where exactly the light is hitting on my object. So again, the top right of the drawing, or the tomatoes, are getting more of the light source, so that will be lighter. And as we go to the left, it becomes more darker, and that's where the shade should stay. And I don't go about blending those green colors all together like I did with the actual tomato, because again, when you zoom out, it's not very prominent, and it is something that does not actually need to be given too much focus. And now I'm just starting to, blend that darker red shade, making it a little more rusty, and I just want to get that color a little bit more deeper here. And I think one of the things that I do here is switch my actual smudging brush. So the brush that I was using for sketching and smudging was the Tinderbox up until this point, but I do switch here, where I'm using a hard airbrush to actually smudge that color around a little bit more. And this gives it a more softer texture. And this is what I typically do towards the end of the drawing, when I just need to blend all those colors together a little bit more. And I think you can see the actual shape and form taking over a little better now. It's just like I said earlier, it's all in blending, and I have learned to trust the process. And I think right about now I go about adding some of my favorite features, which is just adding more highlights to the drawing, so that it makes the overall still life image a little well rounded. And I think one of the things that I do notice when I'm using these kind of brushes or these kind of illustrations, I typically tend to do most of the drawing in one layer and then go about adding certain highlights probably in another layer, versus when I'm trying to make something for my small business, I generally tend to do all of those things in separate layers, just so that I can have a little bit more handle on how I want to tweak some layers. But since this is something that I'm doing just for fun, and this is basically just for my own art practice, I think I just did the entire tomato in one layer and added maybe the greens and the highlights in another one. So there's no particular reason. I just find it more therapeutic, I think. And right about now, I think I switch my brushes once again, and this is probably the last brush that I'm using, and it is to add a little more prominent highlight. And I usually do this with a light brush. This is something, again, which is already available in the Procreate app. I don't have any brushes that I'm using apart from the ones that are available. Maybe a few of them I have created myself, just based on some textures that I've liked, but I haven't put them up anywhere, so they're personal to my space. So I think this is about it. I'm kind of debating whether I would want to add more details, but I think I decide to go against it. I do have to add the water droplets that you see, which I've done on the previous tomato. I do need to add them on the new one that I've created as well. But overall, I think I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. So if you have any questions or comments about this process, please do leave them down below. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next one.